Darling, we've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind, where is the bottom? We've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. We are the newly appointed CEOs of DC Studios. We're here to tell you about Chapter 2.
Again, we say this every time. When this comes out on the podcast feed, it'll be like 9 months from now, and so this is going to be old news.
Just super relevant still.
You guys will have already been fired as the new heads up.
That's right.
Yeah. The rotation already has gone all the way through. No, that's not what this is. As much fun as that would be to run with that bit for an hour straight, which I know we would all love to do. This is, in fact, Ideas Don't Bleed. It's a comic book podcast from Ashcan Press with Matthew Rosenberg. What is this? What is this? That's on the cover art.
I know I make you say it, and it sounds weird every time. I don't know why I said we have to say that, but we do.
I think you just don't like doing a podcast. You hear the introduction, and every time you go,
he's barely doing it.
I am barely good. I definitely found myself the other day. Someone was like, I was in a comic shop, and I was like, yeah, I gotta get this thing, I'm interviewing this person on my podcast. I want to, have the issues. And they were like, you have a podcast? What's it called? And I just went, don't listen to it. And I didn't even tell them the name. I just moved on.
A really similar thing happened to me recently where someone was talking about Substack, which has never happened in my life. But someone was talking about Substack unprompted, and I was like, oh yeah, I know. I work on Substack. All my stuff is through there, like podcasts and stuff. And like, you have a Substack podcast, huh? And I was like, we're not going to talk about it. That's fine.
I did a podcast for a bit. I couldn't really handle it all on my own. Like, it was too much work.
I don't find that to be that much work. I don't work that hard on it.
But I told a friend of mine, I was like, oh, I started a podcast, and he just put his arm on my shoulder. He said, of course you did, Dick. Of course. It's like, all right.
Hell yeah. It's ideas.
Well, I do think they're cool. I mean, I wish I was kind of still doing it because it was a good excuse to talk to people. I was doing like in-person chats rather than, this is before COVID, because I liked the excuse of chatting. I don't know if you find it, Matt, like sometimes you go to conventions. What I loved about them at the start and still do is you do get to have some genuine creative chats, and you come away from it firing. I had that with New York, the recent one, because I hadn't been to the New York Comic Con in 3 years. I came back buzzing to make stuff, but you don't always get to do that at shows. Sometimes you get too bogged into whatever you're doing. So I liked doing that. It just was a lot of work on top of actual what pays the bills, and I don't know. But I think it's cool what you got going here. Like, it's pretty sweet.
It's I
you know what, I'll step in. I'll take over.
No, it's funny because I really do. It is both a COVID thing of like, oh, I'm not doing cons right now, and so it's nice to see people I don't get to hang out with you and all these other people that I don't normally see. But yeah, it is really fun for me to like look at other people's stuff and not just passively sort of take it in, like, oh, I'm reading a comic, but I'm actually like consuming people's work in a very critical way and then getting to talk to them about it and question them. And that stuff is the stuff that really like energizes me about making comics. Yeah. And I don't do it enough. So this sort of forces my hand to be like, this, sort of looking at my friends' work and being like, why is this good? Why do I like it? And that's fun for me. So,
well, for your listeners, I'm Declan Shalvey. I'm going to do the job you're not doing.
Yeah, let's bring out our special guest.
Before you can thank me for being here, and I say thanks,
there.
And I say thanks for having me. I'm just going to say you're welcome. I'm very happy to be here on Ideas Don't Bleed. It is Ideas Don't Bleed, right?
It is. Yeah, you got it right.
It is. Yeah. Welcome, Declan. We're going to do a little clap.
Yeah.
There we go.
My first podcast, people.
I will say you are definitely better at this than me, and at any point you're welcome to do it. Take it over.
You took the wheel with such confidence that Matt just leaned back.
The hardest part of doing a podcast is making sure that Ethan and Griffin get their meals 3 times a day.
Naturally,
yeah. If we don't feed them, they get hungry. They get cranky. Yeah,
apparently you got to feed them. Who knew you had to feed podcasters?
Yeah.
Well, we keep emailing Rosenberg, and we're like, "Hey Matt, can you send some food over? Could you DoorDash some food to my address?" I don't
DoorDash it. I hand deliver it. I show up.
He feeds you from his own mouth like a bird. You know, he sustains you that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pandemic, but you do what you got to do. Sometimes you got to barf into people's mouths.
Yeah.
We got a couple of people who are excited. David's excited. Sketch says, "Congrats to Declan, the new host of Ideas Don't Bleed." I think it's in the works.
Hey, got to give the people what they want, you know.
Of course,
it's fair. I'm moving on because I'm going to be the new host of David Harper's podcast. So
nice.
It's yeah. We're all getting.
By the time he mixed it up a bit, you know, going back to his old theme song. I mean, you know.
Yeah. We're gonna. Yeah. I thought it was time that his podcast got bad, so I'm going to take it over and really run with it.
I think a lot about that time that you were like, I was listening to another podcast and I was like, why is this so good? We're so bad at this. And we were like, what podcast? And you were like, Conan O'Brien's. And we were like, what? Why are you comparing yourself to Conan O'Brien's podcast?
I mean, I've been doing this for like 6 episodes at that point. It's like I should be like as good as I'm gonna get, and it's not very good.
Okay,
it's worrying. I don't know. Now I think
I'm looking forward to being the best guest. You know, the what's Timothy Oliphant of the Conan?
Yeah,
what I'm going for.
Yeah, I mean, you're already the best guest. You've already got that. It's a
best.
I've just been quietly going. When is he asking me? Like Ed Brisson, really? Like,
yeah. Ed, we've only had Ed on with Kelly Thompson. I didn't have him on separately, and
so he's a half a guest.
He's a half guest, yeah,
or a quarter. Kelly probably took more of that.
Kelly takes more, talks more. Yeah, it's a quarter guest, and you know, I don't think we're going to promote him past that. I talked to him. He has a bunch of new stuff coming out that looks really cool that I'm excited about. Probably not going to promote it.
Yeah.
So, Declan, let's do an actual conversation that isn't just us sitting around bullshitting. We have some questions for you. We wanted to just peel back the curtain of who you are and why you are the way you are. if that's all right.
It's I've got a lot of layers. 2. I've got
it's
2
true.
layers.
2 layers. That's
a
lot.
Peel back one.
We're gonna peel back at least one of them.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a crappy onion, but we'll go.
A 2-layer onion sounds good to me. Sounds like just less work.
Sounds easy. Yeah.
It's like not a lot of work.
I appreciate a 2-layer onion.
As long as you're crying by the end of it, then you know.
Oh, yeah. I would love it if one of us cried at the end of this, but I want to earn it. I don't want that forced.
The crying happens in the quick quiz, Matt. Let's be real.
Okay.
So I guess the first question we always sort of ask people, just as a sort of general get to know you, even though we know you, is why comics? Like, why do you make comics? What made you fall in love with comics? Why are you here?
Oh man, I'd be dead otherwise. You know what I mean? Like comics.
That's a good shit.
No, it's all I ever really did, and you know, I was just really happy when I found out people got paid to do it. I've told this story before, but I remember Marvel had a magazine, I think it was called Marvel Vision at the time, and they would do things like interviews with creator and sort of stuff. And I remember Andy Kubert, they were promoting Kazar at the time, and he mentioned like what his contract was or something. And I went into my mom and I asked, like, is that a lot of money? And she went, oh, yeah. I was like, all right, right. Okay, I like just how all I needed to know was what the top artist of Marvel was making, and then I knew it would be fine.
But also, why did Marvel publish that? Why?
I don't know. Yeah, I can't remember the specifics, but there was a number there.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know if it was like maybe it was ballpark or something, but. Yeah. But I was kind of drawing comics before I knew what comics were. I would like watch Star Trek and draw comics of it afterwards, and I think it was slowly you could get a lot of newsstand comics like licensed stuff for like the Turtles or Mickey Mouse and stuff like that So see it around. So I was kind of absorbing it without realizing it. But it was the X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman cartoon. You know, I was just listening to an interview with Clayton Coles on the Off Panel podcast, and like his origin story was the same as mine. Like, you know, yes, I plugged David Harper's podcast, but it was I don't know. Like, I'm from the west of Ireland. Unless it's hurling, no one really gives a toss about what you do. So for me to like comics it was just such a weird thing. But I don't know. I think when it's different now where you can be into so much weird stuff and everyone just accepts it. But like you kind of had to like really go all in on stuff you were interested in when I was young. You know, if it was weird, like you were going to get bullied or shit kicked out of you. So you really had to commit. And I think there's something for that, you know. But yeah, I think it was just in my DNA before I really realized what it like technically was. And once I don't know, I started seeing the American stuff, it just kind of blew my brain open, and I fell in.
Yeah, I was sort of wondering about that because when you started, you were doing a bunch of European stuff to start, and it was I mean you did something in like Judge Dredd magazine, and you had a bunch of like small press European things. Was American comics always your goal from when you started? Was that where you want to be?
Yeah, no, a lot of people would have been reading 2000 AD of my generation, but I was way too square. Like, you know, I'd like that stuff now. I like that genre now, but at the time I was I loved the Americans. I wanted to read Spider-Man and X-Men. You know, I was the superhero stuff I was mad into. So I never really had that huge affinity for 2000 AD. So I never really chased my path. Kind of the thing you'd do with this side of the Atlantic was you'd make a name for yourself in the UK. And then from the UK, 2000 AD, you would go to like Marvel, DC. That was kind of the, you know, the general path for people. But I wasn't. I mean, I would have taken these or 2000 AD work order offered to me. But the only thing I did with 2000 AD was it was like a small press competition basically, where you handed something in and they picked it. So it wasn't like it wasn't work, and it didn't lead to work. So that wasn't really the bad ever. So yeah, I didn't go that way. But then, I don't know, I went to UK conventions, and clearly there was a lot of American guests would come over and stuff. So I just set my sights there. I definitely took some UK work because that was what was available to me. I did a couple of like graphic novels, like a Frankenstein one, a Sweeney Todd one. But it was I was offered 28 days later at Boom Studios, and that was my first American work. And from there, I kind of just kept firing away. And that for me was a platform to try to be seen by Marvel editors and get my stuff seen there. So I don't know. It's kind of mad to think about it now, like all these goals, and I managed to make them. And I can't even imagine. Honestly, couldn't have imagined to see me where I am now is kind of bonkers.
Yeah. Did you?
Real quick. You mentioned American stars coming over for conventions. Were there any that you tried to meet that you were freaking out about?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, there was like editors. I remember Bob Schreck and Scott Dunbier came over, and I remember like I had a Batman sample. I'm like, this is it. I'm getting picked up. Like I've got this great portfolio. I'm going to get work, and like they in the best way possible shot me down so hard. Like they weren't mean or anything. They just were like, you're not there. And I was like, but like, I came away from Ireland, you know. But I'm trying to think that names.
I'm sure you wanted to meet Andy Kubert and borrow some money from him was probably
knowing what he get. Actually, you know what? I've never met him. Out of all the people I've met in the industry, I've never met Andy Kubert, and he was my guy. Like
he's great. He's so nice.
What I expect you to say otherwise on a public.
I mean, it'd be awesome if I was like, he's awful, he's terrible, don't meet him. But he actually is super nice. I signed with him once, and he was just so kind to me. And I like, you know, me being an X-Men fanboy at heart, was kind of like
because that was when I got into X-Men. Jim Lee had gone, so I was reading I caught some reprints. There was UK reprints, but when I got the American comics, it was Andy Kubert on that book for like years.
Yeah.
So he was sort of my guy. But I'm trying to think. I mean, there were some big UK guys. And I got to meet like Liam Sharp and Jock. I'm trying to think of the big American. Joe, it was more. No, I don't think Alan Davis was big for me as well, but they were all UK guys. Who the hell came from? Kevin Nolan, Mike Mignola. Actually, Kevin Nolan was huge. I never thought I'd get to meet him.
Yeah, it's great.
But there's so many conventions over the years. I'm trying to remember. Who was I the most nervous to meet? Yeah, sorry, I'm drawing blank. Sorry.
Are there people now that you were like, oh, I still want to meet that person? Do you have that?
Andy Kubert.
Sure.
I met Adam Kubert at the recent New York Comic Con. I'd never talked to him, but he bought one of the X-Men pages I did, the Wolverine vertical thing. And I just wanted to go up and I'm like, but if he bought a page of mine, he knows who I am.
Yeah.
So, so I went over to say hi, and he just kind of like looked at me blankly. And I was like, you bought a Wolverine page? He was like, oh, and then he knew who I was. It was fine. But just for 1 second there, I felt 14 again. Sorry, what was the question?
Just if there's other creators out there who you like want to meet, if you have like, a list of people.
I've been very lucky. I've gotten to meet pretty much all my heroes.
Yeah, right, nice.
I was at a bar next to Mark Bagley one time, but I never said anything to him.
Oh man,
and he was my Spidey guy.
Sure.
Steve Dillon, I wanted to talk to because I grew up on Preacher, but I was doing the covers to Punisher when he was drawing it with Becky Coonan. Yeah. And I really wanted to say hi to him. His table was only like a little bit away from me, but I was too chicken shit, and then he died a week later.
Oh, jeez.
Have I brought up my Mark Bagley thing on this show?
No.
I went to an Oklahoma convention when I was a kid, and Mark Bagley was there, and that was the person I wanted to meet the most. And I went with my mother, who had to push me because I was so nervous to meet Mark Bagley. And then I went up to him and I was like, hi, I love Ultimate Spider-Man. And he was like, which one was that? And I was like, you fuck. I'm so nervous already. Why are you doing this to me?
There are guys who like to fuck with you. And when you're a kid, you don't appreciate. When you're older, you get it.
Yeah, he was awesome. He was very good.
When you say I went to an Oklahoma Oklahoma convention, it just sounds like a convention for Oklahoma and
for the musical Oklahoma.
It was for the musical.
Mark Bagley's doing a new poster for Oklahoma.
Oh, that would be sick.
He'd do a great poster.
Sick.
Yeah.
I'd be really into it.
I was just trying to think, but I'm lucky. I've gotten to meet like Alan Davis, Kevin Nolan, Frank Miller. I met briefly one time. Like I've gotten to see everyone, or JP Leon. All my guys I've gotten to meet aside from Matt Rosenberg. I mean,
that was a big one for you. Yeah.
But I think
we got to meet formally in person very briefly.
We did
see. You seemed very nervous to meet us.
Check that box.
Sometimes it just doesn't live up to what you're expecting. You know?
I know.
Just, how can it? No. I think I'm very, very lucky. I've gotten to meet pretty much all my heroes. But I'd say maybe it's probably Andy Kubert's my great whale.
The one, I mean, I feel the same. Like I've met almost all my
I could have met Stan Lee one time. I was in the same room as him, but I didn't. It was me and Will Sliney, my friend Will Sliney, and we were both like, no, we leave him alone. We don't want to bother him. Like, and then we found out afterwards, like, he loves being bothered. He should have gone up to him.
I met Stan as a kid and as an adult, and he was exactly what you want him to be both times. I met him as a child, and then like as a Marvel writer, and he was
also technically a child.
As a much larger child, and he was great. But the one for me that I always think about of like meeting your heroes, and then I mean I probably shouldn't tell the story on the air, but fuck it. I was already making stuff, and I was doing conventions, and I was just walking down through Artist Alley because I hate sitting at a table, so I like to wander. And I just walked past Larry Hama's table, and Larry Hama was there. And I don't know what compelled me, but I just went up, and he was like drawing, and I just went up to him and I was like, "Excuse me, sir, like I just want to say," and I just like dumped like a therapist. I was like, I was sort of a lonely kid, and like and like for me GI Joe was everything, and you created this world that like I could disappear into, and it meant so much to me, and like I just went on and on about it, and then it was like, and now I've grown up, and like I'm very happy with who I am as a person, and I live a life that I'm really proud of, and I make comics, and I make things, and I use my imagination, and it was like cultivated by you, and like I just wanted to thank you for like giving me a childhood where I felt like safe and I belonged, and like helping push me towards this dream of like an adulthood where I really get to do a thing I love.
I really feel like Larry Hama right now.
And he was sitting next to, I don't remember who it was. It was some like legendary person who just looked at me and was like, that was really intense. And I was like, yeah, I don't know where that came from.
Called you out on the spot.
Yeah. And Larry Ham was like, well, thank you. That's very nice. And he was like perfectly nice. And I was just like, well, I can never be in a room with him again. Like, I just
trying to think how to the degree I know you, if somebody did that to you, how much of a dick you'd have been back to them.
Oh, awful. I mean, I would, I would have run half, like 10 seconds into it, I'd be gone. I'd be like, I'm sorry, I actually have a thing. Like, thank you for reading. It would just be so uncomfortable.
Have you had like an experience like that where somebody has kind of, I mean, not to that degree because that's insane.
Yeah. That's insane.
But, has somebody made you really feel something, because people say nice things and, they can say stuff means to them, but like, trying to think, has that really gotten to you?
A couple that are there. I mean, I've had a ton of amazing encounters where people say just things that kind of floor me about how nice they are. But, a couple of people have tattoos of stuff I've done and show me, and that's always heavy. And, it's
tough for me because I'm like, I wish I'd drawn that better.
Yeah, people get tattoos of my stuff and I'm like, that's a Tyler Boss tattoo, or that's a there was a couple who got we're gonna get the We Can Never Go Home cover as their wedding presents. They were each gonna get one of the characters, and I was kind of like, that's not necessarily a great thing, but I was also like, that's Michael Walsh art. I didn't fucking draw that. You're getting a Walsh art. Like, I don't.
There is a weird disconnect with like how much stuff like that can mean to people and how much stuff like that meant to you when you were a kid. And like, I'm not trying to sound bad, but like, I don't really care about Moon Knight that much. Like, I don't love the character in the same way. Like a lot of the fans of the book loved the character. I loved the experience, and the creative part of it was great for me. But like, I don't. There's some. It's weird, even though like you're working on something, people can come to you with a level of engagement and passion that like isn't really connected to you as much. And you don't want to be like, you idiot. It's just a comic book, because you've been there about other stuff. Like it's like say with comics it might be different, but like when I see like maybe actors in shows, I used to, like I see Star Trek actors sometimes. I don't want to bother them because like. To me, they were so huge, and I've actually had met them, and they're perfectly nice. But sometimes, the more you respect somebody, the less you want to meet them. I know.
Sure. I've had the two that really like messed me up in a nice way was I had a person in person pull me aside at a convention and tell me this, and I had a person write me a long email about how they were like in a really dark place and, like sort of talking about suicide and self-harm and how something I made sort of helped pull them out of it. And like, that's a fucking heavy thing that I don't think you can prepare for, where you're just like, I don't know how to say any, like, you want to say the perfect thing and there's no good thing to say there other than like, I'm just really happy you're still here and you're okay. And like, and then, I try and think about the things that matter to me like that when I was a kid that like really felt like they were saving my life and changing my life. And whether
like I've moved home from Dublin recently, so I'm kind of meeting all these people who know nothing about comics or people from my past and stuff like that, and it's been a real kind of to remind myself how far I've come and what I've getting to do and how lucky I am to like wake up and have ideas and make them, and that's my job, like it's you can get very, I know people might think it sounds like a dickhead thing to say, but like you can get jaded even doing this, like
for sure
basically childhood dream. You can get very, very jaded, especially when you're creatives and you meet up and you're bitching about companies or some guy who annoyed you. Like you can get into the negative too much, but that kind of like realization is huge. And then to kind of like I was saying, to have that kind of experience come at you, that doesn't happen to me in Ireland because we can't be sincere.
Sure.
I can't really, you just don't say what you mean. No, it doesn't. You just can't do that. But I have to be aware that when I go to America, somebody may get sincere with me, and I'll be uncomfortable straight away.
And you'll be like, Moon Knight is not my thing, and then you push them. You just
exactly. Yeah.
No, it's funny because you talk about like the how jaded we can get, and that for me is like such a major thing of like the tightrope of like remembering it's a job and this is my day job, and like any job there's difficulties and problems, but also like it's the best job I've ever had, it's the best job I'm ever going to have, and like there are 1,000 people behind me who wish they had it, and like that's sort of the perspective. Like you can never lean one way too far or the other, because I think you get out of whack if you forget that like we have a dream job, but part of that is the job.
Well, I mean,
part.
here's something, I don't know if this would have come in a podcast before, but like, how much do you think like a creator's personality comes into play? Because, you know, again, explaining this job to normies and stuff is one thing, but then like the amount of amazing artists I know who their career gone nowhere because no matter how talented they are, they just get in their own way.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know, there was like, without naming names from thing, like I knew somebody was on a book and, you know, they couldn't get a book in because there wasn't enough pressure for them to be on deadline. And then they put pressure on deadlines and they couldn't handle that. And this person was unbelievably talented, like, and, you know, I say this off to people often, like there's people way more talented than me that are not as successful and people way more talented than me that are way less successful. So I think I said that's the same thing twice. You know what I mean? Like, you know, people who might be way more talented, but like they get too angry or they get too, or people who are just brilliant at playing the game and can take a certain amount of talent much, much further. And sometimes it's just kind of like, you know, I think one thing I'm glad for is, I don't know, maybe the way I was raised or whatnot, but my temperament and my ability to kind of like read the room and not be too much of a dickhead sometimes, like, has helped probably way more than however good I am at drawing.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think about that a lot because when I started, I sort of tried to take stock of like who I was as a creator. And, you know, like I read a lot of comics and I'm a huge comics nerd. And I just knew going in, and sort of a mantra I made for myself was like, you're never going to be the best writer in the room. Like, you're just not. Like, there are just writers who are better than me, like pound for pound, just better writers. And I was like, but the one thing I can control is how hard I work and how much hustle I put in. And that to me is like, yeah, I'm the dude who, you know, will stay up until 6 a.m. and get this thing done. Whereas like a better writer might take off at 7 p.m. and go do things. And I'm like, well, that's my leg up. Like, would you rather have this other writer doing this? Probably, but they're not going to get it in time, or they're not going to say yes, and I'll do it. And like, I think that's
sometimes you got a gig because you were the person who was there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I think everybody gets that. But like, part of that is being there. Part of that is being available to be there. You have to like, for me, I'm like, you know, I spent years when they would be like, do you have time to do this? Being like, yes. And like, I don't even consider, I don't check, I just say yes. And then I figure out the time. I mean, I've had 2 years.
Did you notice? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say I've had 2 years. I think 2, maybe 3. I had more last year. I had more DC books with my name on them than any other creator had with their name on them, and I've done that at Marvel too. That I put out more books at Marvel in a year that I was at Marvel than anyone else that year, and I put out more books at DC last year than anyone else.
Is that good?
No. No. Why would that be good? You know,
it can be, you know, because that's the thing is like, you know, being real, like you could do the job and you can work the job.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think I remember, I think I talked to Rick Remender one time and I asked him, does he think he has too many books out? And he said, what do you think? And I said, yeah, I do. Because as a fan of yours, I realize I'm picking books. For sure. Not getting all of them. I'm picking, if you've got 4 books out, I'm picking probably 2.
Yeah.
But like, so there's the saturation element. I think that works against artists too. If you have more than 1 book out in a month, people aren't necessarily buying both books. They'll maybe buy one, you know, and like you also can't control how your stuff comes out. You can't, you know, line up your schedule at Marvel and DC and like this book will come out here and then. So it's a tricky tightrope to
it's also fascinating for you because like, you spent years as an artist, so you're at best on a book a month, and now you're writing stuff and drawing stuff. You're going to be on 4 or 5 books a month coming up, like.
Nah. I mean, well, maybe 3 when Alien comes out. It'll probably be 3 books because I'll co-write Time for Time, and I'm writing and drawing Old Dog and writing Alien. But at the same time, I think there was a huge thing about like if you're not in the stands, people will forget about you.
Sure,
and they 100% will, but. At the same time, I think going away for a little while can build a little bit of anticipation.
Yeah.
So by the time Old Dog came out, I hadn't had a book in print for most of a year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, it covers and stuff that keeps you kind of that keeps you out there. But I think being too available can probably be a bad thing sometimes.
Of course, yeah.
Or being too visible. I think you'd think you'd have to be visible all the time, but I think, well, one, that's not sustainable, because like I can't even do a book a month anymore. It probably takes me 2 months to do a book now. So you're instantly straight there. There's six issues a year then at best.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like what I did with Old Dog is I planned for that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do 6 issues. I'm going to make them the best 6 issues I can possibly do, rather than, which is what I was doing, was running myself ragged, trying to do. I mean, we all need to do it, and I'm not crapping on it at all. It's kind of like a ring of fire any creator has to kind of jump through, of hitting your max where you can't do this anymore, and then you figure out what you can do. And I'm in a fairly good place now where I have a good sense of what I can and can't do, and I'm not too bothered about being on the stands every month. But which, between writing and drawing and coloring and covers, I have something coming out every month. It's just not always a comic, and I don't want any less than 6 issues a year, though. That would drive me crazy.
Yeah. I had a gap when I switched from Marvel to DC. I had a gap, and it was like right in the early days of the pandemic, but I was like building stuff at DC that had long lead times, and I was building a lot of stuff. I was on 4 books for them all of a sudden, but like there was a good 5 months where I didn't have anything out, and it felt wild to me. I felt like I was just like, I felt like it was in like Back to the Future, like I was just becoming invisible and starting to fade away. Which
you must have a good sense of what you can and can't do by now. Like,
no,
I mean, some things change. It depends. Sometimes, like, all of a sudden we need a script now. You need to have a little bit of wiggle room for that to happen, or you need to do like another draft. Some things you can't necessarily plan for.
I have a good sense, but also like the longer I do this, the harder it is. Like when you start, you got something to prove. Like I spent years being like, I'm going to prove who I am. And now it's like, well, they know who I am. I don't need to like wow people. What I need to do is like not die in the next 4 years. So like it becomes a thing of like, physically, like, can I maintain this pace? Can I do this? So like, it's hard because I know that like I could make myself do things, but it's harder emotionally to like really run myself raw. I feel like I'm at a place where I did it for 5 straight years, basically 5 or 6 years. And I'm at a place where I find it hard to justify doing it a lot.
Are you able to step back and kind of look at your career now and go, I'm in a good place, or I want to be somewhere else? Or
no, God, no. I hope I'm never in that place. I hope I'm always like hungry and looking up. Why do you?
No, sorry, I don't mean it necessarily as like I've done it. I'm here. Well, kind of to a degree, I guess, but like, you know what kind of creator you want to be.
Yeah.
And does that match up with? No. Okay. Has it ever been closer, or has it been?
Yeah, it has. I feel like there's certain books where you're like, yeah, this book is what I want to be doing all the time, and there's certain books where you're like, this isn't where I want to be. Like, I'm not putting out a thing that I feel is up to my standard, is not the kind of thing I want to be putting out in the world. And it's hard because it's hard to figure out what those books are. Like I'm really proud of, I did 27 issues on Punisher. Like I'm really proud of that. But if you asked me beforehand, like, do you think Punisher will be a book that you're like come out of it really proud of? I'd be like, Punisher? Probably not. Like, and I love the Punisher, but like,
no, but I mean, these are like, I remember when I was offered Moon Knight, to me it was like, okay, this is my Daredevil. I'll probably never get to do Daredevil, but this is going to be the Daredevil books I wanted to do. I'm going to make this my Daredevil, and it works. Weirdly, like, it became its own thing. And would I have ever imagined Moon Knight was the book that would kind of make me? I couldn't have seen that. But I just kind of think, to me, it feels like you came out the gate so strong with your creator own work, and then you're kind of in the Marvel mines for so long.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels like now you're in a place where you're doing both in a more balanced way, it seems to me.
Yeah. I feel like more like when we do What's the First Place from here, like working with Tyler is like, it just feels like a very different thing for me. And it feels very natural and good. And like, I sit down to write those scripts and I just feel like energized in a way that like sometimes you don't from other scripts and other projects. And I think that speaks to like what you're getting at. Like, I think finding those projects that like you're hungry to get out there and do, and it's never feels like a job, is sort of where I want to be. And I think a lot of that comes from, I mean, I've been very lucky, like working with Ben Abernathy at DC, like you get there a lot. He's so encouraging and gets you excited about the book, but like creator owned obviously has just the leg up in that regard of just like, well, it's yours.
But you probably have way more confidence now as a work for hire hand than you did when you're starting out. I mean, Thunderbolts was my first book, and I was basically just do the best you can and be good to work with, and you've got to prove your earn your phrase.
But also like things change so fast. Like you work with new people, you work with new editors, like management changes at a company, and you're like, there's not sure footing because a lot of things are like how other people view you. It's not how you view yourself in some ways.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And so like, you can work with people who you love and get along with, and then they move on or, whatever. And then you're like, well, it's a new relationship. Like, do I have to go back to square one and try and prove myself to them? And I don't know, like, you feel like you're at a place creatively where you feel really comfortable, like people know what they're going to get. And is that good?
That's a good point, because sometimes you can get cocky. I kind of think I was kind of worried there for a while that Moon Knight was the last, not good thing, like, because I loved working on Injection, but like nothing, the one thing that stayed popular was Moon Knight, and like I'm like, that book came out in 2014. Is like, do I want that to be the best thing I've ever done? I mean,
yeah,
anyone's amazing to get a project like that, but I want more of those.
Sure.
And I think I'm actually in a good place where I can pick. I just want to write and draw my own stuff now. Not that I'll never draw for someone else again. I just think that's what's satisfying me more. And even if it's like I did a Hulk one shot that I wrote and drew, and it's one of the most satisfying things I've done. Just a one-off, one issue. I'm in a place where I don't have to go begging for work, which I'm trying to sound like a twat, but like there's a lot of people who are just trying to find the next gig, and I realize I'm in a place where I'm kind of making my own gigs, which is pretty cool. And especially like now that I've kind of gone all in on a creator-owned book, it's literally like, I mean, it's draining and it's tough. It's a lot of work, but the knowing that I can just come up with something and write it and draw it, and I can make a living on it, it's been really, honestly, it's satisfying but empowering.
Yeah,
it's been really empowering, and not that I'd never do, like I'm writing stuff at Marvel at the moment, but I just think I'm in a good place, and as long as I don't, I think it's easy to fall. It's easy to fall down another level on the ladder if you're not careful, because you're scared. And I think when COVID happened and everything, I remember thinking I could just take any gig that was offered to me, and I got offered a couple of gigs, and they weren't bad gigs at all. But I just knew, you know what, I want to write and draw, so I'm only gonna write and draw stuff. And then John Hickman asked if I do the X-Men thing, and I said, yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah, sure.
But that was my one caveat. Okay, it's Jonathan Hickman, biggest writer at Marvel. Like it's worth doing this for like a few months and then continue on your plan. But I think, but it's also scary, and I think that's the key. If you're scared, if you're a little scared, that's good. If you're totally just kind of blasé about stuff, I think the work won't be good. But if you are scared and you want, doing everything like I am an old dog is scary. And while that could cripple you, I've decided to go like, you know what? No, this is good. Like being scared is a good thing. Run with it.
For sure. First of all, I want to say congrats on being the first person on our podcast to say twat. Like, bravo for that.
Okay, I got more. I got more to thank.
Yeah, no, it brings a real Irish charm to it that I think we've been missing, and we're going to try and get that on.
We've been having to put them in post for everybody else.
Yeah,
since going back to the west of Ireland, I've been hearing way more swear words I have not heard in many years. None of which I think would be suitable for this podcast. But
I remember going. You were signing in New York, and this is a fucking tangent, but you were signing in New York, and I went and we hung out, and you were like, oh, like the bunch of Marvel people are at a bar, like, do you want to come with me and we'll go? And I was like, yeah, let's go. And we went up there, and we went to this bar in Midtown, and we're sitting down. It's a lot of the junior editors were there, and they're like, sort of younger and sort of bright-eyed and enthusiastic. And you were telling a story, and you used a swear word that is very common to use overseas and not as common to use here. It starts with the letter C. And a bunch of the editors did a legitimate like, and I was like, oh, I love this so much. I love it because it's like, if you go to Ireland, you go to England, it's not a big deal. People say it all the time, but over here it's great.
It's a phrase I heard before. Over here, it's like punctuation.
Yeah, yeah. It was a great moment because you said it, and I was like, I just immediately like looked at everybody and was like, oh yeah, that's a lot of people like not quite sure how to process. And you weren't saying it like in the way that Americans say it, where it's like vitriolic and nasty. You say it in a very casual way, and it was great. Real high point in my career, actually.
Well, I'm glad I didn't tank my own career there.
No, you seem to be doing okay. No, but I the point about being scared, like, yeah, I think the fear is really good. Like the converse for me, I think I maybe even said this on the show before once, but I remember talking to Brian K. Vaughan about something, and I gave him a copy of We Can Never Go Home when the trade paperback came out. He'd like said some nice things about it and had been very kind to me. And so he came to New York, or maybe I was in LA. I don't remember where I was, but I gave him a copy of the book, and he was like, oh, cool. Thank you. And he was like, are you happy with it? Which I thought was a really interesting question. And I was like, and I sort of paused, and I was like, yeah. And he was like, it was a long pause. And I was like, a lot of stuff I do different. I was like, my first creator-owned book, a lot of stuff I do different. And he was like, hold on to that. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, that wanting, when you look back on your work and you're happy, you're not hungry anymore. There's no, you're content and you're resting and you're settling. And like, you should always be able to look back on your work and feel like I could do this better. I want to hit it better next time. I want to knock it out of the park. And like learning from your mistakes and studying your work and like trying to see where you can step up and where you can change things and improve things. And I really take that to heart. And like, I mean, I don't think I'm a person who would ever look back at my work and be like, yeah, that was awesome, and like high five.
Fist bump in the air.
Yeah, just like nailed it again. But I
tough,
do.
A lot of this stuff comes with muscle memory, like this is my own controversial take, but like, a lot of people are complaining about, how sexist superhero costumes can be, and how, the way like the female form can be and idealized or whatnot. I have to kind of look back at all the old superhero drawings. You realize those guys were knocking out 2 pages a day. Like they're not, I'm not saying they're not thinking about what they're doing, but like so much of like drawing is muscle memory, and you're drawing nude figures and you draw a belt on them, and then that's a superhero costume. People expect a different level of illustration now, so you kind of have to really dig in more. But it's. But if I'm not careful, I'll draw the same face every time. I need to kind of go back and change a bigger nose or different ethnicity or something. Sometimes you just kind of, because you're getting it done. If you're again talking to like normal people here, I was talking to somebody, they're like, how do you get? I think I just did a cover and I sent it to them just to show them. They're like, you did that in a day. I was like, yeah, and they're like, they were like, that's amazing. And I'm like, I wish I'd gotten it done faster. And you just kind of forget that a lot of this stuff. With the grind that comes with it, you can just kind of rely on what and the same with writing. You can just kind of relax on what and it's especially when you're getting success and you're getting more gigs.
I mean, I see it in people's books, and I catch myself doing it in my own books. Sometimes I catch myself too late, but you'll do like, oh, this fight with this supervillain is in an empty warehouse, and you're just like, a warehouse? Like, why are these people in fucking warehouses? And it's just like, it's just simple. It's muscle memory.
It's a time for time, because we literally have. I think we have written warehouse locations in nearly every issue, but that's a staple of the book. I say that with pride.
Yeah, that's part of the DNA of Time Before Time is the warehouses. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of shortcuts like that even in writing, where you're just like, yeah, this conversation is done in a way that like you're not challenging yourself. You're like, I know what I have to get out of this scene, and I'm just going to get it down, and you can see it. And like the interesting thing is always seeing people who can take those scenes and elevate them, and like. I assume my feeling in art is like that's always the real challenge. Is like that was something that I thought early on was like when I was first trying to make comics and I was looking at all these artist portfolios and everyone is showing you Batman perched on a roof and the Hulk punching through a wall, and I was like, yes, everyone has a Batman and a Hulk, that's cool. I want to see you have two people have dinner in a diner, and will that be dynamic, and will I care about that? Can you elevate that to be something that's visually interesting to me? And like, it's one of the reasons that I'm always sort of in awe of artists, because it's just like, it's a thing that I can't even wrap my head around doing, of like making something that's beautiful and storytelling and all these things and it's so physically demanding and precise and like doing it consistently. I'm always like, I bet I could train myself, if I gave myself 5 years to go real hard, I bet I could train myself to draw like an okay page, but I bet the next page wouldn't look anything like it. I bet I could never be consistent. Like, consistency scares the hell out of me.
It's tough. I was just thinking, because everyone
5 years might be optimistic.
Have you written, is Old Dog all written? You know, and if I was smart, I would have written the whole thing before I started drawing it.
Sure.
Whereas now I'm in a stage where I'm writing and drawing the last few issues, and so I'm drawing issue 4, and I've known what I want to do for issue 5 for a while, roughly. I had the outline, I knew it in my head. But just 2 days ago, I was like, oh, that would be nice. Yeah, I could do it that way, and I have to write it next week.
Yeah.
You know, I just find that I just need to gestate on things like that. I don't mean I need to do it last minute. It's just that if I write it now, I'm going to have something else next week that'll make it better. So I know it's tough to say, like any kind of interesting visual stuff. I just find I just need to kind of put a script on like a slow cooker.
Oh, yeah.
And let it just kind of go. Now, I mean, I'm trying to say this in like, this is my genius, you know, you other people, you just write fast. It's fine. No, it's just because I don't write. I've never written scripts at the pace and say you would have done like 4 or 5 a month, God knows what. But I just find, especially for something like Old Dog, I'm getting more visual ideas. So I'm trying to let it percolate as much as possible. Whereas the smarter thing from a production point of view would have been to like have them all written in the bag and then not have to worry about them. But I know those issues wouldn't be as good as what I'm doing now, which is kind of interesting. It's an argument to be less responsible.
Sure, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I think about that a lot when people talk about sort of superhero comics and stuff, and it's, you know, I think people don't understand the grind and the assembly line nature of the product. That it's like all of these books would be better if you guys would wait a year and we would but that's not how the machine works. The machine has to have, you know, 12.
Also, those books have probably never come. Like, that's the other thing as well, is like these books never come out.
That's true.
Like, I consider myself fairly responsible freelancer, but like, you know, I get stuffed in. If I try have it in a day early if I can. Sometimes it's a day late. Sometimes it's on top. But like, as responsible as I am, at the same time, I think if you gave me 8 weeks to do a book, it would take me 8 weeks. If you gave me 12 weeks, it would take 12. You know, you have to be those deadlines. Stuff would never get done if we didn't have these things, you know.
That's so. Yeah, I mean, I think it's true of writers, but I don't deal with writers in the same way. But I always, I used to tell people, like, artists are like a gas. They'll take up as much space as you give them. If you give them a month to draw a book, they'll figure out how to squeeze into a month. If you give them 4, it'll take them 4 months to draw the book. Their volume expands when you give them more space. And I think it's true of writing too. I think there's a lot of writers who are.
And that was my problem with Old Dog, was because I gave myself a certain amount of time, and just life came in the way. So all my lead time got eaten up. Yeah. Plus, also, I don't know, when I'm sure you know, when you start a new book, like development time takes a while, but I knew that if I didn't just say it comes out in September, it had never come out. I needed that, you know. Now it's coming out in September. No, it's supposed to come out in August. It came out in September. Yeah, because I was trying to claw as much lead time as I was, because I needed it all up. But that's it. It's the constant kind of like, you know, I need the fear of God to get something done, but at the same time, I need a certain amount of gestation time. So that's tough. It's tough when it's on you, you know.
Yeah. I sort of want to ask about, you know, the move from drawing and writing to just writing, and like.
So you want to ask me a question?
Yeah, is that okay?
Podcast? No, it's okay, because I think I've been doing it the other way around.
Yeah, I'd step in.
On me.
I've been a bit rusty in my podcast hosting, so I'm going to try and step in and see if I still got it. I'm just always fascinated by, like, one, did you want to write? Was that something you wanted coming up, or you just wanted to draw, or you were just like, writers are so fucking annoying?
I can do the latter. I, like all these, kid writers coming up, they think they're so great. Well, I'll show them. No, when I was starting out, I just wanted to draw. Like, drawing was all I ever really wanted to do. And then I was 23 or 4, when I got my first Marvel, or no, 27. I was in my 20s when I got 27. I got my first Marvel gig, and all of a sudden I'd reached my goal, my dream.
Yeah.
Before I even hit 30, I reached my life's goal. And I think for me, it was like The Simpsons when Homer climbs like the mountain and then you see more cloud and there's like a whole other mountain. That's what it became for me. Like, it was like I just needed more goals. And I would say, I mean, I was analyzing writing actually, that's a great thing about drawing is you could listen to so much stuff, podcasts. I was listening to DVD extras and, creator commentaries when those were a thing.
Sure.
I was always interested in the craft of writing, but I never really had the balls to do it myself until I had the idea to do Savage Town, which is basically kind of like an Irish Sopranos, which I knew would never really get made unless I made it. And while I'm known as an artist, I could write it with some help. If I had an editor to kind of help me kind of flesh it out, I could do it. And I did. And someone drew it and it got made. And that was really, that ambition having been met, I realized I really liked writing and I liked writing for other artists. And from a cynical point of view, being able to write your own stuff meant that you were like, when you're an artist in Marvel, you really don't know how you're kind of seen within the company. You don't know how editors see you. You don't know how writers see you, as they tell you. So, what you find out afterwards is like you were up for some gig and somebody else didn't want you on it. And there was an argument about it. And you're like, I would have liked to have been part of that argument, So I figured, like, no matter what happens art-wise, like if I said something stupid, it's entirely likely, or people didn't like my work anymore, or people didn't want to work with me anymore, at least I could just make my own stories. So there was a slight cynical aspect to it,
Sure.
But the more I wrote, the more I enjoyed it. And I really like building projects. I like working on cover design. I like coming up with plans. And I like, for lack of a better term, like being a kind of a producer. Like I helped Rory McConville and Joe Palmer put their Rise in Blood graphic novel together. I basically was a ghost editor on that. And I liked it. I liked putting stuff together like that. And that tends to be more the writer's role than the artist role, and same with doing design work. I kind of and as well, like I used to go with the colorist, running best colors in the industry, and after we broke up, I realized I wasn't able to color my own work. I've been relying on her for ages to make me look good. She made me look great, but then all of a sudden I was like, I don't like not knowing how to do that. So I've kind of wanted to just expand my skill set across everything. And now I like that, except lettering, fuck that. That's for losers. Yeah, that's right.
Holy shit.
No, I've done it and I hate it. I hate it. Even though I bought that new Todd, sorry, who did the new book? Tom, no, that's Nate Picos. He did the lettering book. I was buying it. I bought it. I'm like, why am I buying this? I don't want to letter. But you know what? I don't like not knowing how to do something. So but writing was a key to that, and it's been a blessing because it just means I can, there's so many great artists out there who don't. I'm sure you see it yourself, like because you work within like Marvel or DC, whatever. There's artists they'll never go with, and they're amazing. Yeah, and I'd like to make a project for them, and then people can see how great they are. It's not always not everybody can go through the Marvel DC pipeline like say I did. Sure. And I really like that. I like maybe it's just a big power trip, but writing kind of opened those doors for me, and I just found myself constantly just scratching at that itch. I don't think I could go full-time writing, like writing 4 scripts a week, 4 or 5 scripts in a month. I don't think I can handle. I think I can only really have 3 ideas in my head at the same time. Oh, cool. Especially working on them as well. Like, I have 3 at the moment. I don't think I take on another book until one of them ends. Yeah. And I'll replace that, but because I don't know about you, but my bandwidth only expands so high, and the wider I spread it, stuff starts falling through the cracks. Sure. I'm not sure I answered your questions.
No, you did. I'm just like, do you ever feel like, for me, when I look at your stuff you write, whether it's stuff that you write and draw, or stuff you write for other people to draw, it feels to me like there's a clear visual sense to it. Like it has you're a great visual storyteller, and that has transferred into your ability to tell stories. I mean, I think about like an Old Dog, like there's just a lot of great sort of, you find these iconic shots and moments, and sometimes they're small, just like a close up on his eyes or whatever, or maybe it's, the big splash page of him leaping across, over from rooftop to rooftop or whatever. But like, you have this visual flair in your writing that I feel like is not an easy thing to find. And I think a lot of writers get credit for it because they work with artists who know how to put that into a story. And my assumption is that since I've seen you do it in other people's stories, that you've brought that over to your writing. Do you feel like there's stuff now that you write more that has impacted the way you draw? Like, do you feel like your art is being influenced by your writing at all?
No, I don't think so. But I think the drawing has filtered it. Well, maybe that's not. I think I think one of the things I'm just naturally good at with drawing is economy. Like, like I'll put in detail, but I know where not to. And I remember when I started writing, I remember thinking like it was this block of marble that had to be chiseled perfectly, like a sculpture. But what it was more like working with clay. And once I kind of got my head in around that really helped, because it was malleable. It wasn't this perfect thing to be figured out. I don't think the writing has affected the drawing, but I think the drawing is definitely, it's more of a sense of pacing and tone. I think, like, I did a graphic novel called Bog Bodies with Gavin Fullerton, and I keep saying now I wish I'd drawn it, because I wrote, there's barely any backgrounds in the fucking thing. I could have drawn it in a week. But what Gavin added to it, what I like is I can see my DNA in it, but I like what Gavin added to it made something better. I think working with like Jordi Belair for many years, I really learned the benefit of, like, if someone's got a good idea, take it. And if I was working with someone like, say, Warren Ellis or whatever, I'm not going to go, I got a better idea than this. I'm like, no, maybe take the good ideas, because it just makes you look better anyway.
For sure.
And I think that whole experience just really kind of helped me with my writing. But I wish I could tell you, the writing has affected the drawing, but I don't think it has. But I think that while I was very worried about being a good writer, like writing good dialogue and stuff like that, I don't worry about that. Just kidding, of course I do. But I think getting the tone and getting the feel and what I love about drawing is I love creating mood and atmosphere, and you can do that in writing as well. And especially especially with the right artist, is going to just knock that out of the park. But I feel like I'm still able to tell stories that I'd like to draw. But I realized that I don't have to. Actually, that was another reason I wanted to write more as well, as I realized I had more stories I wanted to write than I could possibly draw. And characters I'd like to write that I don't necessarily want to draw, But I think the mystique of writing kind of was pulled apart when I approached it like a design brief, if that makes sense. Like I need to know what the format is. Is it 5 issues or is it a graphic novel? Is it a one shot? Or and once I know what the format is, that becomes part of the brief. Like with in other emails, you wanting a cover, they want 2 characters and a certain background or whatever, and then taking that and trying to solve that problem is what writing is to me. If that makes sense.
No, for sure. I think in a way that's I always think about building, like constructing a page as a very mathematical sort of thing, like from an artist perspective of like figuring out the panels and the economy of the size of the panels and where everything goes. And so you're saying that you approach writing that way sort of makes sense to me, that it's sort of it's something to be solved in a way that
if I took one of your scripts, it's words on a page, and then you've got pages that you need to draw this stuff on. So what I always liked about comics was solving that puzzle. It's problem solving. And I was worried when I started writing that I was going to lose that experience, because that to me is comics.
Yeah.
Once the layouts are done, that's the comic. And then unfortunately you've got to spend a month and a half drawing the fucking thing. But like that's where the magic really clicks in, and I really liked that. And I was worried, like, oh no, if I don't have that experience, am I going to enjoy this as much? But what changed was that the writing became the problem solving aspect, and that I really like. And then when I do my layouts in Old Dog, they just kind of flow. Mm-hmm. Whereas, working with another writer, and it not that they'd be bad or anything, like would happen with any writer at all, I'd be banging my head against the wall trying to make it work, because I really try to stick to the script, 100%. Sometimes you got to tweak it, but I'm not one of those guys who just does whatever it feels like. I want to, you took the time to figure this out, and I want to figure it out with you. Mm-hmm. But when I'm writing for myself, it just kind of starts at the beginning and flows downstream from there, and that's really fun.
Yeah. Are your scripts super detailed in like the layout stuff when you write for artists? Are you?
They're more detailed writing for another artist, but only because, like, say, an Old Dog script is lean, because I know what it's going to be. Also, sometimes I'll be like, it takes place here, and then by the time I think there's issue 2, we see the black circle base, and it's like an abandoned island. Yeah. And that panel, right up until I was drawing it, was like a mountaintop. But in the meantime, I saw this cool. I look at a lot of websites of abandoned imagery, because I like drawing that stuff. And I saw this island. I'm like, oh, that's so much cooler than like a hilltop.
Yeah.
So sometimes I try to plan everything as much as I can, but sometimes it'll be like a 5% thing I'll pop in there. But when I'm writing for somebody else, I'm just trying to make sure sometimes I get the image that's in my head on the page. Mm-hmm. It's generally, though, very specific. Like, I think there's in Alien, I just wrote something where very specific kind of splash page, and I kind of like say what's in that. Otherwise, it'll just be like, on, the scientist closer. Like, I keep it fairly lean, because I think that from an artist's point of view, you want enough to go on where what's happening, but not so much where you can't add something.
Yeah.
If and I've had that experience where there's too much in the page, and I'm basically just trying to fit in everything, which is very oppressive. And then there's the other side where there isn't enough meat for you to kind of chew on. So, I think I hope I'm writing scripts that are fun to draw, because that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, it seems that way to me. It seems when I look at the stuff you write for other people, like you're giving people a lot of things that seem like stuff I would feel like I would see in something you would draw, which always feels like energetic and lively and smart. And I feel like that.
I don't know, truly. I mean, it could be a bit of projection there, Sure. I'd have to like look at specific things, but like I do try. I would say working with Warren Ellis really kind of broke things open for me a lot, where again he had a specific idea and he'd explain and he'd put it down there, and otherwise I had so much freedom to put stuff in, and I felt like it felt more collaborative, even though he's not taking notes for me or anything like that,
Sure.
And I want whoever I work with to have that same experience where they're putting in everything that they want to put in, and I don't want to be handcuffing an artist, because it's really tough to draw a whole script when you feel that way,
Yeah, I'm sure. We have some questions from the audience, I feel like.
We do. I can throw the first one out.
By the way, is just me pouring some tea into a cup. It is not.
You're not peeing.
I'll show you on video, just so you know.
And that concludes our segment T or P.
T or P.
I love when we play that game every week.
Every episode.
This is the first time it's ever been tea.
And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our discussion with Declan Shalvey. Make sure to check out Old Dog, as well as everything else Declan is working on, by giving him a follow on Twitter at Declan Shalvey and subscribing to his newsletter at declanshalvey.com. To get the latest episodes of this podcast, as well as news, giveaways, and even comics delivered straight to your inbox, go to ashcanpress.com and sign up for the newsletter. We'll be back next week for part 2 of our discussion, and in the meantime, you can write to us at ideasdon'tbleedpod@gmail.com, or tweet to Matthew Rosenberg at Ashcan Press on Twitter, me at Tales to Astonish, or Griffin at Griff Sheridan. We'll include some of your correspondence on the show, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. And big thanks to Summer People for our theme song, Where's the Poison? Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Where is the boy?